Staff Sergeant Mara Keene stepped down from the transport van into the furnace air of the desert facility. The cracked asphalt radiated heat into her boots, and the weight shifted to her left leg with the practiced caution of someone who had long ago learned how to mask weakness as deliberation. She carried her duffel like every other soldier arriving that day. Plain fatigues, dark hair pulled into a regulation bun so tight it made her look severe. There was nothing remarkable about her at first glance. Nothing that would stand out in a group of recruits cycling through another advanced training program. That was the point. The Army had taught her to erase individuality. Only her eyes betrayed what she really was. Dark brown, restless, cataloging angles and exits without pause. Inside the administration office, the air smelled of paper and disinfectant. She gave her name and was handed a key card with no ceremony. The admin sergeant's only words were functional. Second floor. Room 214. Do not be late for briefings. They do not care what you did before you got here. Mara nodded, offered no story, and climbed the stairs. The barracks carried a different scent. Something older. Ground into the walls. 30 years of sweat. Boots. And the faint bite of cleaning solvent. She chose a bunk in the far corner. The same choice she always made. Back to the wall. Clear view of the entrance. A simple precaution, but one that came from habit born in places where choosing wrong could mean not waking up. She unpacked methodically, folding and arranging with a precision that made the bed look more like an inspection display than a resting place. At evening chow, she sat alone by the windows. The mess hall was loud. Soldiers leaning into each other with the energy of those eager to prove themselves. At a nearby table, Lieutenant Markham gathered a small audience. He had the polished confidence of someone who had never known true failure. His posture was perfect. His uniform, immaculate. His smile too sharp. Torres sat across from him, a heavyset man built like a recruiting poster. Miller leaned back with the smug ease of someone whose wit was his weapon. And Peter laughed too quickly at every remark. Nervous energy always spilling out. Markham spoke just loud enough for the room to hear. Some people are here because they can do the job. Others are here because someone felt sorry for them. When Mara walked past, the conversation died. Torres muttered something under his breath that made the table laugh. She kept walking, face still, but she filed each voice and face away like terrain on a map. The next morning, the rifle range stretched under the pale desert sky. Heat shimmered above the sandbags as targets swayed at 200 meters. For soldiers at this level, it should have been an easy qualification. Mara's first shot went wide. The reload that should have been automatic fumbled in her hands, fingers angling the magazine wrong. Seconds bled away while the others kept firing in steady rhythm. When the final buzzer sounded, her target looked like it had been shot at by someone learning for the first time, not by a woman with a decade of service. The instructor shook his head and wrote her name near the bottom of the board. Behind her, Markham's voice carried. Guess some records do not transfer. Peter snickered. Torres cracked his knuckles. Miller just smiled, that cutting smile. Mara left the line without expression. The urban combat course was worse, built from shipping containers and plywood. It echoed with simulated gunfire. Mara stacked on a door, weapon ready, but moved too slow. The paper target killed the hostage. Before she reacted, she pushed harder on the next room, but her sweeps were off. Angles too high, then too low. When it ended, her teammates were all casualties, and the board marked her with another failure. That night the mocking began. Tourist. Dead weight. Words whispered, but always just loud enough to sting. She sat on her bunk in the corner, hands resting loose, jaw tightening only when she knew no one was watching. Master Chief Rains observed from the edges. He saw what the others ignored. During breaks, she handled her weapon in fluid patterns, running silent reloads and clearances, as if correcting mistakes no one else had witnessed. Her gear was arranged with ruthless precision. Each piece, placed for function, she never sat with her back exposed. She ate methodically, scanning without appearing to. These were not the reflexes of someone green or broken. They were the habits of someone who had survived too much. To the squad, she looked like failure. To Rains, she looked like a question mark. A soldier, erased into ordinariness, waiting for something unseen to bring her back into focus. The desert sun pressed down on the training yard until even the air seemed heavy. Staff Sergeant Mara Keene moved through the obstacle course with steady determination, her body showing the precision of long conditioning. She cleared the first wall with clean form, crossed the rope bridge without faltering, and low crawled beneath the wire as if she had done it 100 times before. Her time was solid, close to competitive, until the flashbang simulator detonated. The sharp crack of sound and the burst of white light froze her in place. It was not a tactical pause or calculated delay. It was complete paralysis. Her breathing quickened. Her eyes went distant. And for 15 long seconds, she stood motionless, while the course continued around her. When she finally moved again, her pace was broken. The instructors recorded her time at the bottom of the board. Whispers spread across the yard. Not mocking now, but uncertain. The word PTSD hung in the air like smoke. Torres leaned back and folded his arms. Saw it before. He muttered for others to hear. People who freeze like that are done. Miller added with false authority. That is textbook trauma. You cannot trust it in a real fight. Peters laughed nervously, as if afraid of silence, while Markham said it plainly, she is broken. The scoreboard glowed with her failure, a public ledger of inadequacy. Later that day, the kill house echoed with gunfire and shouted commands. Mara stacked against the first door, rifle tight against her shoulder. She breathed steadily, then entered too slowly. The paper target killed the cardboard hostage. Before she could act, red light flashed. Failure. She tried to force speed through the next corridor, but her angles were sloppy. Her muzzle swept high, then low, and another buzzer marked 2 more casualties. Her squad groaned in frustration. When the drill ended, Markham shook his head, his voice carrying. That was painful to watch. Someone is going to get hurt if she keeps freezing like that. Mila Smiekel. Maybe she should try accounting. Peters gave another high-pitched laugh. Torres flexed his shoulders, the gesture casual, but meant to remind her and everyone else of his strength. In the cafeteria that night, the names grew sharper. Tourist. Deadweight. The words followed her to her corner table. She kept eating. Methodical bites. Jaw tight, but expression calm. Her eyes still scanned. Always scanning. Cataloging doors and sight lines as if survival demanded it. Rains watched from across the room. He had seen real failures before. Soldiers who could not keep up. But Mara's case was different. The fumbles on the range did not match the fluid drills she ran in private. The hesitation in the kill house clashed with the way she arranged her gear with surgical precision. Something in her was restrained, not absent. The next morning, CQB drills brought no relief. Mara hesitated at every entry point. She was careful to the point of paralysis, while her squad moved with textbook aggression. By the end of the run, Peters had been marked dead, Torres wounded, and Miller shouting that she was a liability. The instructor's notes were blunt. Poor performance. Unfit under stress. When they posted the scores, Mara's name hovered at the bottom again. The scoreboard became more than a list. It was erasure in bright digital numbers. A reminder for everyone who glanced at it that she did not belong. By the end of the second week, her reputation had hardened. Markham still mocked, but with less humor and more disdain. Miller diagnosed her with casual certainty. Torres kept showing off his physique as if comparison alone proved superiority. Peters clung to their approval with awkward laughter. Around them, the other trainees grew quieter. Their whispers no longer carried amusement but unease. Watching Mara freeze under the flashbang had made them nervous. They respected trauma in theory but distrusted it in practice. No one wanted a teammate who might collapse in the middle of chaos. Rains walked the edges of the training yard, clipboard tucked under his arm. He saw the clenched fists, Mara relaxed too quickly. The way she forced her shoulders loose after mockery. The small signs of control layered over deeper tension. She was not failing because she lacked skill. She was failing because something in her refused to release. The flashbang had cracked the surface for a moment, but Rains suspected the truth ran far deeper. The others saw a broken soldier. He saw someone holding back. Whether by choice or by design, he could not yet tell. The desert sun burned over the plywood city, built to mimic hostile streets. Staff Sergeant Mara Keene stood at the rear of Markham's squad, her rifle tight in her hands. The exercise had been explained with brutal simplicity. Multiple buildings. Hostile among civilians. 30 minutes to clear and extract. Success required speed and coordination. Failure meant points lost for every simulated casualty. Markham's voice carried through the comms with smug authority. Keene, stay in the back. We will handle the dangerous parts. Mara nodded once, her face impassive, and fell into position. The first building went wrong immediately. At the door, she hesitated, half a second too long. And Peter surged through alone. He caught a burst from a hostile actor and declared himself dead, his voice sharp with frustration. Thanks for nothing. Dead weight. The buzzer marked the kill, and already the squad was bleeding points. Mara pressed forward carefully. Too carefully. Corners that needed speed became choke points. Markham barked at her to move faster. Torres shouldered through with impatience. Miller cursed into the comms. By the third building, they were unraveling. 2 more simulated casualties stacked against her hesitation. The instructors stopped even pretending to expect success. Squad 4 is done. One of them said flatly into the radio. Still. They finished the motions. Reaching the extraction zone with red lights flashing above them, Markham tore off his helmet. His face flushed. This is exactly what I was talking about. You cannot carry dead weight and expect to succeed. Torres nodded and gestured toward Mara. Obvious from day one. Miller shook his head. Some problems are not fixable. Peter's laugh was high and nervous. The scoreboard confirmed the verdict. Their squad sat near the bottom. Mara's hesitation written into numbers no one could ignore. That night, the barracks hummed with low voices. Mara lay in her bunk in the far corner, back against the wall. Eyes closed. She did not sleep. The others thought whispers were private. But the words carried across the rows of beds. Did you see her just stop? Miller said. Voice pitched like an instructor explaining theory. Textbook trauma. Means she is done. Peters gave a snort. You cannot trust her in a real fight. Torres flexed and muttered that she had no business even being here. Markham summed it with brutal certainty. She is broken. Somebody better tell her before she gets people killed. Mara's breathing never changed. Only her fingers twitched once against the blanket before stilling again. At dawn, the world was different. The desert lay in half-light. The air cool before the heat rose. Mara stood alone at the range, rifle in her hands. No instructors. No squad mates. Only silence and the soft rasp of desert wind. She moved through the drills with flawless rhythm. Magazine out. Reload in. Bolt forward. Target acquired. Malfunction cleared with a slap and rack. The weapon snapping back into place. Each movement was precise. Crisp. Unbroken by hesitation. Her face stayed calm. Her posture relaxed. But the rifle was an extension of her. Alive in her grip. She flowed from one motion to the next, until sweat streaked her temples and the weapon smoked faintly from repeated fire. From the shadows at the edge of the range, Master Chief Rains watched without announcing himself. He saw what the scoreboard did not record. Her hands worked with the confidence of years in real combat. Her reloads were too quick. Her transitions too efficient to belong to someone failing on accident. She was not broken. She was contained. Rains recognized the signs. He had seen other soldiers like her. Quiet professionals who carried too much and revealed nothing. The question was not whether Mara Keene had the skill. The question was why she kept it hidden. As the first rays of full sun washed across the yard, Mara finished her drill. She disassembled the rifle and laid each piece in careful order on the bench. The weapon was stripped to its parts, yet in her hands it looked whole. She breathed out once, steady, then began to rebuild it piece by piece. Calm as dawn itself, the desert heat pressed down like a hand on the training yard, the kind of heat that made voices carry and tempers short. The paperwork for Mara Keen's dismissal was already moving through channels, and most of the trainees assumed the end was inevitable. She lingered by the weapons rack, checking the same rifle she had checked 100 times. Her posture tight, her leg braced to hide the faint hitch that still haunted her stride. Then the silence came, not the casual quiet of a break in drills, but the unnatural stillness when something unexpected intrudes. Heads turned as a black SUV rolled through the main gate, its tinted windows dark against the bleached desert light. The vehicle stopped near the admin building, its engine clicking as it cooled. 2 men stepped out, but the one in front drew every eye. Commander Cole Maddox moved with the authority of someone who had lived too long in hard places. Tall, broad, his uniform plain but unmistakably sharp. He carried no wasted motion. His gaze swept the yard like a lens, cataloging details before most noticed he was looking. Trainees whispered under their breath. Voices low, speculative. Who is he? Why is he here? When his focus fixed on Mara, the whispers sharpened into confusion. Mara's hands stilled on the weapon. Her face betrayed nothing, but her shoulders shifted almost imperceptibly, as if bracing for something she had not expected to face here. Markham and his trio watched from a distance, their mockery muted for once. Peters muttered nervously about high-level reviews. Torres suggested she must be in trouble, and Miller studied her reaction with sharp interest. Mara kept her eyes down, but her jaw tightened. Maddox crossed to Master Chief Rains without hesitation. Chief, I am Commander Maddox. I understand you have Staff Sergeant Mara Keen in your program. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of authority that did not ask for acknowledgement. Rains straightened instinctively, caught between protocol and the instinct that something unusual was unfolding. Sir, she is scheduled for dismissal. Performance has been. Maddox raised a hand, not in impatience, but with deliberate control. I am not here to argue the record. I am here to watch her run one more course. Rains hesitated. Regulations were clear. Outside observers not permitted in evaluations. But the intensity in Maddox's expression suggested refusal was not an option. What exactly are you expecting to see? Sir Maddox's answer was simple. Not failure. She is holding back. The words cut through the yard, though he had not raised his voice. Mara froze by the weapons rack, rifle in hand, heat shimmering around her like a mirage. The silence stretched again. Then whispers filled it, buzzing across the trainees. Holding back. What does that mean? Rains studied Maddox. Then Mara, torn between disbelief and the uneasy sense that both men and shadows moved beneath this request. Finally, he nodded once. One more run. Mara lifted her eyes at last. Dark and unreadable. Someone remembered her. The desert sun beat down on the evaluation yard, baking the plywood structures until they seemed to shimmer. The final test was staged as a hostage rescue. Multiple buildings connected by narrow lanes, each filled with role players and targets. The time limit was 30 minutes, but the real challenge was precision. Civilians mixed among hostiles. One mistake meant failure. The squad checked their gear under the harsh light, sweat running down their temples. Mara Keen stood with her rifle, posture steady, expression neutrale. The same picture of controlled mediocrity she had presented for 2 weeks. Everyone believed this was a formality, a final stumble before dismissal. They stacked up on the first building. Markham took the lead, voice firm on the comm, his usual arrogance leaking through. Mara, keep to the rear. Try not to get anyone killed. Peters chuckled nervously. Torres rolled his shoulders like he was warming up for a fight. Miller simply said, "Let's move." The breach began. The door swung, and chaos erupted inside. Mara entered with her usual hesitation. Her angles were late. Her rifle lagged. Peters went down almost instantly. Hit by a hostile actor's paint round, he called his death loud enough for the instructors to hear, "Damn it. Keen. You're dead weight." The buzzer blared. Another red mark recorded. Markham cursed, pushed the team forward. They moved with mounting frustration, muttering about how they were doomed from the start. From the observation line, Commander Cole Maddox watched with eyes that saw what others missed. He studied Mara's patterns. The rhythm of her hesitation, the way her gaze tracked, not the obvious corners, but the hidden lines of sight. To him, it was not failure but containment. Like a dam holding back a flood. Halfway through the second building, the squad bogged down. Markham barked orders. Torres muscled through doorways. Miller kept snapping at Mara to keep up. She seemed a half-step behind at every turn. Then Maddox stepped forward, his voice carrying over the commnet with absolute clarity. "Keen, ghost knife. Execute." The effect was immediate. Mara's posture changed, as if a switch had been flipped. Her shoulders squared. Her rifle snapped to her shoulder with practiced fluidity. The hesitation evaporated. She surged past Markham before he realized she was moving. Weapon already acquiring targets. A hostile popped from a side room, but Mara's round struck before the figure had fully emerged. A controlled pair center mass. She flowed into the next corner, weapon switching to her off shoulder, to clear the tight angle without pause. Torres stumbled trying to follow her pace. Markham's voice broke with confusion. "What the hell?" Miller fell silent, eyes wide. The sharp quips gone. Peters trailed, stunned that the same woman he had mocked for weeks now moved with lethal grace. Mara advanced like water down a slope. Unstoppable. Fluid. Inevitable. She cleared rooms with anticipation that bordered on premonition, her muzzle already tracking the space before targets appeared. Each reload was seamless. Magazines dropped and replaced without breaking stride. She transitioned from one shoulder to the other as naturally as breathing. Every angle covered with economy of motion. Instructors stared at their stopwatches. Hands frozen. The building that normally stalled squads for 10 minutes was dismantled in less than 3. Mara never raised her voice, never barked orders. Yet the squad found themselves pulled in her wake, covering sectors they hadn't even realized were exposed, until she guided them with a glance or a shift in position. The third building erupted with multiple hostiles at once. Markham hesitated, caught between targets. But Mara was already moving. She dropped one, pivoted, fired on the second, then kicked a door with perfect timing to disrupt the third before he could fire. Torres tried to keep up but tripped, swore, scrambled back to his feet. Peters followed blindly, heart hammering, trying not to be left behind. Miller watched with a mix of awe and disbelief, his neat theories about trauma unraveling in front of him. They reached the final hostage room. This was the choke point where most squads failed. The hostiles were placed in overlapping fields of fire, the hostage in the middle. The geometry brutal. Mara paused, only long enough to read the space, then moved. Her rifle barked twice, dropping 2 targets, before they finished their scripted shouts. She pivoted, muzzle low to avoid the hostage, rolled into the second angle, fired again. The room collapsed into silence. The hostage was secured, extraction route already mapped in her mind. She gestured once, decisive, and the squad followed without question. The buzzer sounded. This time, the tone of success. Stopwatches were checked, rechecked, shaken as if the numbers could not be real. 10 minutes. A full record shattered. No squad had ever come close. In the staging area, the silence was thick. Disbelief, radiating from every face. Instructors who had marked her as broken stared at the scoreboard, unable to reconcile what they had just witnessed. Markham pulled off his helmet, sweat running down his face. His confidence fractured. What the hell was that? Torres shook his head slowly. Still breathing hard, Peters whispered. She was holding back. Miller said nothing. His sharp tongue finally stilled. Mara safed her weapon with calm precision. Expression unreadable. The dangerous force who had just dismantled the course seemed to vanish as quickly as she had appeared. She returned to the quiet woman they thought they knew. Composed. Unremarkable. As if the transformation had been imagined, Maddox stood at the edge of the yard, arms folded, his satisfaction quiet and restrained. He had expected nothing less. Rains, beside him, whispered, "Ghost knife." Maddox only nodded, his eyes never leaving Mara. The truth had surfaced. Undeniable. And every person on that field knew they had witnessed something beyond their comprehension. The stopwatch numbers remained on the board, a silent monument to shattered expectations. The hostage walked free, symbolic proof that Mara Keene was not broken. She had only been waiting for permission. The debriefing room was small, windowless, and painted a shade of gray that swallowed the light from the overhead bulb. It smelled faintly of oil and paper, a space built for conversations that were not meant to leave its walls. Mara Keene sat at the narrow table, her rifle laid out in precise pieces. She moved with slow, deliberate rhythm, brushing carbon from the bolt carrier, setting each part in careful order. The disassembled weapon looked more like a puzzle than a tool, a quiet reflection of how she carried herself. Across the table, Master Chief Rains leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his eyes flicking between Mara and Commander Maddox. The weight of what he had just witnessed was still settling on him, though he tried not to let it show. Maddox stood rather than sat, posture square, his presence commanding even in the confined space. Rains finally broke the silence. "I've trained hundreds of soldiers. Commander, I've never seen anything like that. What did I just witness out there?" Maddox's voice carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to revealing only as much as was necessary. "You saw a ghost knife operative doing what she was built to do." Rains frowned. "That phrase you gave her? It flipped a switch." "That's exactly what it did." Maddox replied. "The Ghost Knife program was a classified initiative, hand-selected operatives, trained for precision missions in denied areas. They undergo conditioning, psychological and physiological. It creates a barrier between their day-to-day functions and their operational state. Without an authorization phrase, they appear ordinary, hesitant, limited. With it, they revert to what they were trained for: ruthless efficiency, zero hesitation." Rains shook his head slowly. "You're telling me she's been acting?" Mara's hands paused for just a fraction of a second before resuming their work. "Not acting," she said quietly. "Contained. The conditioning keeps everything locked away. It's like having a leash on a guard dog. The dog is still dangerous, but it will not bite until someone gives it permission." Her voice was calm, almost clinical, but her words carried an edge that made Rains glance at her with renewed respect. Maddox nodded. 3 years she operated under Ghost Knife. Deep insertion missions, hostages, high-value targets, sabotage, dozens of deployments. And in all that time, not one friendly casualty, not one mission left unfinished. Her record is clean, flawless. Rains looked down at the rifle parts spread across the table, then back at Mara. "So why is she here?" Stumbling through drills like a rookie, Mara slid the bolt back into its carrier. Her finger steady. "Last mission. I was injured. Close-range IED. Hostile territory. They rotated me stateside while deciding if I was still fit." Brass wanted to know if I could function without the leash. They placed me here, under observation, to see if I could blend into conventional units. Blend. Rains repeated. He exhaled, rubbing a hand across his jaw. All those failures, all those freezes. It wasn't weakness. It was restraint. Maddox said firmly, "You saw what happens when she is authorized. That is who she is." The silence stretched. Outside the room, beyond the walls. The scoreboard still displayed the record time. Mara's name sat alone at the top. Impossible to ignore, yet impossible to explain. Rains leaned forward, elbows on the table. So what happens now? Does she go back into the field? Back into the shadows? Maddox shook his head once. No. People like her have already given enough. The brass will reassign her, likely to training command, passing on what she knows is valuable in its own way. The program is small. It has to be. Too much exposure would kill it. Mara clicked the rifle back into place, the sound sharp in the heavy silence. "That's fine," she said, her tone even. "I didn't ask to come back." Rains studied her for a long moment, caught between admiration and unease. What unsettled him most was not what she had done, but how calmly she carried it, as if violence of that scale required no effort at all. The windowless room held the secret close. The rifle lay whole again, cleaned and ready. Outside, the scoreboard glowed, a silent testament to what had been revealed. Inside, the truth was spoken only in measured words, destined to vanish into classified files. Mara sat in silence, her hands folded neatly, waiting for orders that would once again decide which version of her the world was allowed to see. The cafeteria no longer rang with laughter when Mara Keene walked in. The same tables that once echoed with pointed jokes and easy arrogance now carried a quiet tension. Soldiers spoke in low tones, their eyes shifting toward her before flicking away again. She moved with the same measured pace, tray balanced in her hands, and chose her usual seat by the windows. It was the spot with the clearest line to the exit, a choice that had always seemed strange before, but now made people uneasy. The scoreboard in the training yard had not been reset. Mara's name remained at the top, the impossible time displayed like a scar, carved into the program's collective memory. Every trainee who glanced at it was reminded that the quiet woman they had dismissed had become the standard none of them could reach. Peters was the first to approach. He lingered near her table for a long moment, shifting from foot to foot, then finally spoke. "Look, we didn't know. I mean, we thought you were." His voice trailed off, embarrassment coloring his face. "We thought you didn't belong here. I'm sorry." Mara met his eyes briefly before returning to her meal. Her voice was calm, steady. "Una dorned. Most people don't know. That's the point." Peters swallowed and nodded. But she added one more truth that froze him where he stood. "Because I wasn't authorized to." She did not explain further. She did not need to. Torres and Miller never apologized. Instead, they kept their distance. But Rains noticed how their eyes followed her during drills. They studied her movements carefully, as though hoping to learn something by osmosis. Where they once flexed or smirked to show dominance, now they carried themselves with quiet caution. The mocking names had died without ceremony. Markham was the one most changed. The sharp uniform, the perfect posture, the air of certainty, all of it looked hollow now. He performed the drills competently, but with a hesitation that had not been there before. He stole glances at Mara during exercises. His jaw clenched, his confidence fractured. It was as if her existence had rewritten the scale by which he measured himself, leaving him unsteady in his own shadow. Rains watched the shift unfold over days. The cafeteria had become its own battleground. The once loud group now subdued whenever Mara was near. Silence replaced derision, and respect was measured in distance rather than words. Mara carried on unchanged. She completed her drills with solid professionalism, never slipping back into the unleashed state Maddox had revealed, but always competent enough to remind everyone she belonged. In the quiet of those days, Rains found himself admiring her more than he expected. She had not demanded respect. She had not fought to defend her name. She had simply endured until truth revealed itself. And now the squad lived in its wake. Some lessons, he thought, did not need to be taught aloud. The morning after the record-setting course, the black SUV pulled away under the punishing desert sun. Its tinted windows reflected the scorched training yard before disappearing in a shimmer of heat. Commander Cole Maddox left, no speech. No ceremony. Only a brief nod to Rains and a quiet reminder, do not try to push her back into the shadows she came from. People like her had already given enough. Then he was gone. The hum of the engine fading into silence, as if the entire visit had been a mirage. Life at the facility settled back into its routines, but the atmosphere had changed. The cafeteria was no longer a stage for mockery. Conversations dimmed when Mara walked in. Not out of hostility, but out of respect, shaped by unease. She still chose her seat near the window. Back to the wall. Eyes scanning exits, without seeming to. No one joked about it anymore. Torres and Miller kept their voices down. Peters carried himself with quiet embarrassment. Markham moved, with a stiffness that betrayed how deeply his confidence had cracked. Mara herself gave no sign of change. She checked her gear with the same meticulous order, folded her fatigues the same way, performed drills at a level of competence that was solid but unremarkable. She never repeated the unleashed performance Maddox had drawn out of her. But she never faltered again either. To the instructors, she was steady. To the trainees, she was something else entirely WW. A reminder of how fragile assumptions could be. When the final day came, the formation stretched across the cracked asphalt. Every graduate standing in regulation lines under a sky so bright it hurt to look at. The air smelled of dust and sweat. Boots aligned in perfect rows. Mara stood among them, indistinguishable at a glance from any other soldier in Class Bravo 12. Her uniform was plain, her posture correct, her expression calm. No one outside the program would ever know that she had carried a name whispered like a warning ghost knife. Yet the scoreboard remained. Across the yard, the numbers glowed. Her time untouched, daring anyone to surpass it. Instructors left it posted, perhaps out of disbelief, perhaps because erasing it would have felt dishonest. It was the only visible trace of what had happened. A silent testament that carried more weight than any certificate or medal. Rains watched her in formation and felt a quiet respect settle in his chest. She had endured ridicule, suspicion, and near erasure. Yet she chose no retaliation, no boasting. Her dignity came from blending back into the crowd. As if anonymity was its own shield, those who had seen the transformation carried it privately. A truth never meant for reports or files. When the orders were read and the class dismissed, Mara stepped away with the rest. Another name on a roster. Another soldier moving forward. But those who had witnessed the silence break knew better. Some legacy did not need parade. They lived in whispers that never faded.